If you've ever made a game in Unity, there's like a capsule that you just use because it's like taller than it is wide, so it's just like a human. We're doing a development diary for this game, right? But the thing is that I didn't start the game today. I started the game I started the game like a month and a bit ago. I don't actually know when this video is going up. I might have started this game 2 months ago by now. Point is, at time of filming, this game is about a month and a half old, so I need to explain where the game is at right now, and what we did to get here. Everyone I know that develops always chastises me for polishing early, because you're supposed to kind of, have your programmer art and give it real logic, and then put the assets in finally. The first thing I did was just go into my camera settings and do some color correction before I'd even made any things. You were running around a field of cubes, but they had great ambient occlusion and were casting beautiful shadows. Because I like to see the game looking pretty quickly, otherwise I just panic. So there's like some nice particle effects, there's like dust and fog, and everything kind of rolls and lights nicely. And the project's set up to work sort of probably as it will continue to work for like another 6 months, in terms of its cinematography, I guess. The other thing is obviously the game's procedural, so you have to write a series of rules. One of the things about procedural design is it's not necessarily what is going to work well, it's what is going to break everything. How do I make sure the computer knows not to do that? For example, if you're generating obstacles at random, and when you are generating a procedural landscape, the computer generates a ring of obstacles around you in such a fashion that you cannot get out of that ring. Your game is very small all of a sudden. You cannot leave this ring of rocks or mountains or whatever, so you're kind of done. So you need to teach the computer how not to break things. But there's a lot of other stuff that has been worked on. So there's these 2 modes. The camera knows what to do when it's in these 2 modes. So your kind of building mode is a little more traditional, over the shoulder, so Zelda-y or Dark Souls-y or whatever you like, just, third-person action angle. And it's dynamic and it moves around with your mouse or thumbstick, although I haven't got that set up yet because that'll come a little later, but ultimately it's designed to work with both. And then when you're in the tactical view, you've got this kind of more traditional XCOM camera where you're roaming rather than rotating, and you can place nodes as to where you want to go next, is essentially sort of what the combat is. But what it translates to for the player is you can give a series of instructions to your character as to what actions they should perform in what order, and your character will go over and do that. So right now there's only 2 actions in the game, which I've just called move and dash punch. Move is you move around, you can move 6 tiles, and you can move anywhere that is not on an obstacle or through an obstacle. And dash punch, it's not a dash punch, it is you roll and punch, because it turned out that was the easier animation to get hold of, because I'm currently using animations from a package rather than having done my own with mocap. And we'll see how the budget allows in terms of animation, because it's important to look really good, so I'll probably end up using a lot of external tools to help me with this. This is kind of one of the realities of game dev that you might not know. Asset flipping is like awful in this industry, and especially awful on Unity because it's free and everyone does it. But asset management, which I guess is a polite way of saying asset flipping but respectfully, is in every single game you've ever played. What was all the fuss in the newest Modern Warfare about guns having been reused and stuff like that? Everyone's doing it. Everyone's doing it because there's a series of models made by professionals that you can buy rather than hiring that professional to do it because they've already done it. And animations are one of those things that's how I'm handling it right now. And we'll see how it stretches. There's a lot of things I'd like to have unique. There's a lot of small things like walk cycles and stuff that for the most part you take from existing motion capture footage that was captured 20 years ago. And why would you need to change it? That's how someone walks. So that's sort of where the guy's at now. You punch baddies on hexagons and you get treasures and you upgrade and you go around, and also you place hexagons, and there's a lot of levels to it. Hexagons are not a simple shape. So I am not good at maths, I have discovered over the last 2 months. I'm not good at maths. I thought I was competent at maths. I'm not. I'm incompetent at maths. Or at the very least, I'm okay at maths, and hexagons are like weirdly hard. So if you see games on like hex grids, like Civ or whatever, just pull one out for Sid Meier who made that decision, because square grids align pretty easily. So there's only 3 shapes that tessellate properly, right? Or 3 polygons, 3 regular polygons that tessellate. There's triangles, but you can picture them like that, and then like that, they have to flip to tessellate. Squares, super easy. Square, 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 square. Hexagons, I chose them because they're prettier than squares. That is not a good reason to make what is fundamentally, at some point in your life, going to end up being a business decision, right? It's costing me money to do this at some stage. So I thought tessellating hexagons would be about as easy as tessellating squares. Far from the truth. The squares are to put a square next to a square, you go square width, if it's 1, you go, well, this thing is at 1, this thing must be at 2, this thing must be at 3, and you're going up. Well, if it's 1 high, it's a square, it's 1 by, they're always something by something, then it's 1 up or 1 down. Very easy numbers to remember. The numbers that I have ended up mathsing out in my head are, if I'm not mistaken, the square root of 1.5 times 0.6666. And I think maybe just the square root of 2. These are not, first of all, to have to describe a number as a sum, that's too much maths for me. I would like to say the number out loud as a string of digits, and I can't. I have to say it's the square root of something. So clearly already, that is too complicated. Anyway, point is, really hard to tessellate hexagons, because they're not even evenly next to each other. They get offset a little bit, and generating a grid of hexagons is very hard. I've had to do that 3 times now, because I keep getting it a bit wrong in a different way. And every time I redo it with sort of new maths, and I'm not good at that. So that was a pain. Anyway, sorry. I don't know who I'm only angry at myself. This is just for posterity's sake, so I can watch this back and shout at myself for having chosen hexagons when squares would have been absolutely fine, to be honest. So I had to make it so you can place hexagons that fit next to other hexagons. I also had to make it so that you can do pathfinding, right? Because when you're in the combat, guess what? It's a hex grid again. And you have to zigzag around through the hexagons or shoot through the hexagons in order to get to where the baddies are. So the pathfinding grid has to be a grid full of hexagons with a bunch of hexagonal meshes on top of it, and your character has to know how to move through them. It's been an interesting journey. And then after that, so you might think, well, if you don't know how a game works, you think, okay, so you've got a character running around. No, I have a tic-tac running around a series of hexagons. I had to give that thing a body and a head and tell it that it should move its limbs, which is a whole new challenge, but at least I knew that one. It turns out, making a functional human-shaped thing, running around and doing human-shaped activities, is substantially easier to a non-maths man than just making a hexagon sit next to another hexagon, like a jigsaw puzzle. It's been very stressful. The next step is probably to make sure that multiple abilities can work in different fashions. And also that you can always see your character, which is kind of one of those things you don't always think about, but I'm probably going to talk about that in its own video, because that's quite a unique problem that I had not foreseen being a problem. Oh, there's grass too. Let's quickly talk about grass. If you don't know how grass works in video games, welcome to the club. I did not know how grass worked in video games. So it turns out there's a lot of different ways to do grass, and no one talks about it. I don't really understand how it's done. It turns out that grass is basically, I hate to spoil the illusion for you here, but this is a development diary. This is going to happen a lot. Grass is basically like a card that's always facing the camera with invisible bits, like a PNG, right? That's just usually a photo of grass. And what you do is, as you walk around, the card's got some smart logic in it to always face the camera, or sometimes the specific verts of a shape can face the camera, but that's not really important. The important thing is you're looking at a 2D object that's always facing the camera, and if it's layered in interesting ways, or it's dense enough, you can be tricked into thinking what you're looking at is grass, and then usually there's a shader that makes it wave around, or sometimes things respond to you standing on them and they'll animate, and usually the further away from the camera something is, the kind of shittier it's rendered, or the bigger the chunks of grass are, or just the less they care, and often at a suitable distance they don't render it at all. I didn't know this, and I actually feel like there's going to be a lot of people watching this who are much younger than I am, who have never done game dev, that are no shit, that's how grass works. There's just some stuff you don't know. I spent 2 days trying to work out grass. So there's grass in there. Looks fine. Looks like fine grass. And I'll spend a lot of time on this grass because I am now determined to make the best grass ever because I'm so bitter about having got it wrong so many times early on in development. But I think that's the most recent thing I did was Google how do game grass 6 times a day. Read some forum about the very specific things someone was trying to solve, where it's like, how do I make sure my grass yellows during my day-night cycle? No, what is grass in a game? I don't know what it is. Tell me, someone tell me. Turns out it's just cards. It's cards facing a camera. Or at least that's the way I'm currently doing it. Sometimes it's cards not facing a camera at weird angles. That's another way people do it. I've not done it that way. I've done the cheeky way. But there's tricks to make it seem smarter than that. And boy, if you don't optimize early on and make sure that your grass isn't everywhere all the time, you're going to crash your game engine because you're trying to load it. I mean, the thing about grass is that there's usually a lot of it. You don't usually just get like, oh, look, 4 grass in my field. A field is, gonna estimate here, 1 trillion squillion blades of grass per field. So if you have 1 trillion squillion anything in a game, that's it, you're done. Your game's over. What you've made is grass. You haven't made a game, you've made grass, slow grass on a computer. And what I had to make was a game in that. So it's very tricksy. If you're not looking at it, it's not there. That's step 1, it's culling. You can't see it if you can't see it, it's not there, it's magic. And also when you can see it, sometimes it's being cheeky and it's not really there either. It's an optical illusion. So yeah, I think that's it right now. The footage should hopefully explain the rest away. Thank you for watching my video. See you in the next video. Goodbye. You can still spawn inside a rock, and your game is essentially over.